In my previous video, I asked a simple question. Why? Why is any of this stuff happening? Well, that was a mistake. It was better when I didn't know, and that tells you all you need to know about the quality of this mystery story. This episode is the first time I've ever seen Star Wars be the best it's been in a long time and then immediately faceplant. It's the best it's been in a while because of the action. The fight scenes in this episode are top notch. This is what the sequels in Ahsoka should have been. The pacing is great, it's well shot, it's got elements of Hong Kong choreography. There aren't tons of cutaways so you can actually see what's going on. It looks like they're actually trying to attack and kill each other, not just hit each other's swords. It's dynamic, it's fluid. As fight scenes go, there's nothing to complain about, which is why somebody had to find a reason to complain. Normally, I don't watch any reviews while I'm reviewing the show. I want to avoid being influenced by anyone else's opinions. However, I couldn't avoid some of the comments about this episode, and there were two issues worth addressing. The first is how the scenes look and how they were shot. Claiming that the staging is bad because part of the scene was shot through the trees doesn't make any sense. This has been done in numerous martial arts films. It was used in Return of the Jedi in the throne room fight scene. Showing Osha's perspective of looking at the fight through the trees for a couple of minutes is fine. This is a classic fight scene trope. If using it in the Acolyte suddenly bothers you, then you're just looking for a reason to complain. The second complaint, however, is valid. In the fight, Tagalong is able to shut down the Jedi's lightsabers by headbutting and blocking them with his armor. The show doesn't explain how this happens, and as far as I know, this is the first time this has ever been shown in a film or TV show. I do remember reading something like this happening in one of the Expanded Universe books, I, Jedi. So I looked it up, and the metal used to cause this is called cortosis. It's extremely rare, and its canonical use has been to block lightsabers or disrupt them, temporarily shutting them down. There's been back and forth online over this, but I don't think anyone on the show knew about cortosis. I think they had Tagalong do this because it looked cool, like with him separating his lightsaber, and that was the beginning and end of it. That said, the defense of this as being an okay move because it's in the lore is a weak argument, because this is a deep cut. It took me 2 days to remember that this was in I, Jedi. Sure, I read the book 20 years ago, so that's part of the reason, but it's also that cortosis isn't a common piece of Star Wars lore. Most fans won't know about it, which means that if you have someone use it, what they're doing won't make sense because we've never seen anyone disrupt a lightsaber like that before. This is lazy writing because the writers could have, and should have, set this up earlier in the show. This should have been used in the opening fight between May and Indara. May could have used the armor to short out Indara's lightsaber, and used Indara's shock over that to kill her, which would have made more sense than Indara letting herself be killed. Then when the Jedi investigated Indara's murder, the bartender could have mentioned what happened, and some Jedi might say something like, "How's this possible?" The only thing that could have done that is cortosis. But that hasn't been used in 1,000 years. Not since... And then stop before mentioning the Sith Empire. That'd be enough to make the scene make sense and add to the non-existent mystery, which leads us to the many problems with this episode. The Acolyte was billed as a mystery story. The problem is that there's no mystery. Just random questions that either don't get answered or have the least interesting answers possible. The gist of what happens in the episode is that Tagalong fights the Jedi and kills all of them except for Sol. But since we only know 3 of the Jedi by name, when they start dropping it's like, oh no, not obligatory black guy number 3. He was my pretend favorite. While Osha watches Tagalong manhandle the Jedi, May tries to escape unseen, but Jackie comes in to arrest her and the pair fight. I gotta admit, I was surprised that the show let Jackie get the upper hand because the show is all about identity politics, so technically, the black girl should win. But no, Jackie manages to capture May, in a pretty good fight scene too. Everything up to this point is fine. It's the fight between Tagalong and Sol where everything starts to break down. Sol asks who this guy is, and Tagalong says, "You don't remember me?" Well, how could he? You're wearing a mask. That was my first thought. My second thought was, what could he be talking about? Because we haven't seen anything hint at Sol having something to do with the Sith, or having another Padawan, or randomly training someone else. There's nothing in the show to explain why Tagalong would say this, and that is terrible writing because there's no setup and no payoff. You could get away with that in the first episode, maybe even the second, but not the 5th. So my third thought was that maybe this wasn't Tagalong. Maybe this was actually one of the witches who just happened to have unusually mannish arms. Then the line would kind of make sense. Maybe this was Discount Darth Maul, and that would explain what Tagalong says to May about her always having been weak. That implies that this person knows her, and the only people that could have known her would have been the space witches. Now, how would this happen? Well, when Yor takes Osha back to the ship, he mentions that Tagalong fights in an unusual way, and that he can get into the Jedi's minds. Osha says that her mother could do the same thing, referencing that time when Black Mother Askani mind-raped a 16-year-old boy because the Jedi wouldn't leave. So, could the space witches use the Force to make themselves appear to be another person? Force illusions are a thing, so technically this is possible. Except, when Sol tells Tagalong to show his face, Tagalong refuses, saying that it would let the Jedi read his mind, meaning whatever his helmet is made of blocks telepathy. Except, Tagalong uses telepathy to mess with the Jedi and May, so this helmet only blocks incoming telepathy, not outgoing telepathy. Listen, I know it's not a popular thing to say anymore, but I'm gonna say it anyway. That's fucking retarded. It doesn't make any sense at all. How can a helmet cause one-way telepathic traffic? It would be better if Tagalong was so powerful that he could block the Jedi from reading his thoughts like Palpatine could, instead of something as silly as his helmet is a traffic manager. Oh, but it gets worse. Right after Jackie captures May, Tagalong attacks her. They have a discount version of the Anakin Count Dooku fight, and May uses that as a chance to escape. Tagalong chases after May, and Sol comes in to help Jackie, but Tagalong gets her alone and reveals his separating lightsaber, stabbing Jackie to death. Sol is obviously upset by this, but then says, "She was a child, who you trained to be a warrior and brought into combat." How is this the argument? She's old enough to arrest people in the name of the Republic, to interrogate people, to take down an assassin with minimal effort, but it's a bridge too far if someone tries to fight her back? Did anyone think about this line? It doesn't make any sense. The Jedi literally send Padawan across the galaxy to negotiate serious disputes by themselves. Other people let Padawans lead their armed forces. They're not viewed as little kids, pretty much by anyone, so I don't get this line. Also, the dude has killed everyone except for Yor by this point, so why would Sol be surprised that Tagalong would kill Jackie? But then it gets dumber. May shows up and Tagalong captures her, so Sol sees an opening and tries to attack him, but Tagalong uses May as a shield. He brings up how un-Jedi-like it is to attack an enemy from behind. That's new to me, but whatever. We're supposed to think it's bad that the Jedi have rules, like not attacking an unarmed enemy, which again is new to me, but the principle is fine. Don't use excessive force is a good rule. I don't understand why this would make the Jedi look bad. Then Tagalong reveals that he's a Sith, which Sol doesn't respond to but should, considering the Jedi's history with them, but that's not the stupid part. This is the stupid part.
Freedom. The freedom to wield my power the way I like, without having to answer to Jedi like you. I want a pupil, an acolyte.
Okay, so the show has been trying to make this argument that the Jedi are a problem because they control how people can use the Force. The thing is, 1, that's not true. There are over 70 different factions of Force users in the Star Wars universe, and the Jedi largely leave them alone. The Jedi only get involved when those groups either tap into the dark side or try to impose themselves on other people. Even the idea of the Jedi taking Force-sensitive children isn't true because the parents can always refuse, and the Jedi won't train kids who've already formed attachments unless the kids are unusually powerful in the Force. For some reason, the idea of this show is to make the Jedi into villains, but it's not working because they're not really doing anything villainous. Misguided? Maybe. Self-interested? Definitely. But harmful? Threatening? Dangerous? I don't see it, and that leads to point number 2. The Acolyte doesn't show the Jedi doing anything to justify viewing them as a problem. The only attack we ever see being done using the Force is when the Space Witch mind rapes a 16-year-old boy. That's it. The Jedi don't do anything to anyone. It's being hinted at that maybe they did something to the Space Witches before they died, but we're 2/3 through this mystery, and we still have no clue what that was. You can't just say that the Jedi are bad guys and not show them doing bad things, especially not when they've been the good guys of the series for the last 50 years. It's just not gonna fly. Speaking of what's not gonna fly, I didn't miss that little sleight of hand the writers did with Tagalong. Did you catch it? He says he wants the freedom to use the Force as he pleases, which is the same thing the witches said, except Tagalong is being presented as a villain while the witches are being presented as victims. I wonder what the difference is between the two. No, it's not Tagalong attacking the Jedi because, again, Black Mother Askani mind-raped a 16-year-old boy just to show her power. No, there's something else, some thing, or maybe three, that makes Tagalong different than the witches. It seems like the reason Tagalong is presented as a villain is because Tagalong is a guy. Ignore his actions. His reason for doing what he's doing is identical to the witches. He wants to explore the Force as he sees fit and train an apprentice, but that's bad. The witches want to explore the Force as they see fit and train apprentices, presumably created with the Force so there's never any males involved, and that's good. I'm not twisting it, that's what's presented in the show, and that's also where this type of story tends to go. Most fiction about female-only societies wind up with the woman good, man bad framing. It's certainly the context some of the actors have taken with the show. Jodie Turner-Smith claimed that Star Wars has always been patriarchal, which is complete nonsense, but that does kind of show the mindset behind the scenes. The problem, if this is the attitude behind the show, is that if Tagalong and the witches are using the dark side of the Force, it's understandable for the Jedi to try to stop them. We've seen what happens when the dark side takes control of a person. Dark side users are dangerous because it's addictive, grants them easy access to power, and makes the user less concerned about other people. Trying to say it's not bad when women use the dark side isn't gonna work. It's bad when they use it too. So, the show needs to establish what the witches are actually doing, which it hasn't done even though we're 2/3 into the season. The mystery has jumped from who's killing the Jedi and why, to what happened 16 years ago, to what really happened to the witches, to why did May switch sides, to who is Tagalong. Just asking questions doesn't make something a mystery, and you can't keep changing the setup and having no payoff. You have to get the audience invested in why any of this is happening, and that's just absent from the show. We're given no reason to care about any of this. What we get instead is Osha using her droid to get these bugs to follow the light, and using this to get the bugs to attack Tagalong. Of course, Yord has to die in the process, but let's be honest, no one cares. There's no investment in any of these characters because we barely know them, and they all have the personality of wallpaper except for Soul. At any rate, Tagalong tells Osha not to trust Soul for what he's done, which we don't know anything about. Then Osha attaches her droid to Tagalong's back and he gets attacked by the bugs and carried off into the trees. May uses that as a distraction to stun Soul, and then there's another discount Anakin moment, this time with Osha and May, with May saying that the Jedi turned Osha against her. Now this would be a perfect point where May could reveal the truth about Soul and what happened during the fire, so that some of this begins to make some sense. But that doesn't happen. Instead, Osha tries to arrest May and then gets Kamehameha because she doesn't know how to block. That's in the show. That's not a joke. That's literally in the show.
You never could block.
Oh, but that's not the one. This is the one.
Aw, you gotta be fucking kidding me.
Put aside cutting the hair with a lightsaber and having it just perfectly match your sister's hairline. Set that aside. Bitch, you have a tattoo on your fucking forehead that we've seen in every fucking shot. How in the hell is cutting your hair gonna cover that up? Your head moves. Your hair moves. Eventually people will see the tattoo. But not now. No, when she goes up to Soul, he just believes she's Osha and then takes her back to the ship. But then Basil shows up with the missing piece of the droid, and he can smell that May isn't Osha. I would have thought her goofy-ass walk would have given that away, but whatever. And what about Osha? Well, now she's in the hands of Tagalong, who obviously survived. So, hopefully the next episode will finally give us some resolution to any one of these half-assed mysteries, because the audience deserves at least one payoff. Now, how much you want to bet that the show is going to find a way to blame Tagalong for what happened to the Fingerbangers 16 years ago? Maybe something like he was a failed experiment because he's male, or he was another Padawan or potential Padawan also there, and he was jealous of the women for reasons, and then he killed them, and then the Jedi covered it up, or something to that effect. I just have a feeling that they're going to try to find a way for the witches to have done nothing wrong and then blame everything on a man. I could be wrong, I doubt it, but what do I know? I'm just some guy.